Hey everyone, and welcome to Module 6 in this Django course. In this module, we will be fleshing out our users app and adding functionality so users can sign up, sign in, and sign out. I'll be following along every step of the way. Let's jump straight into it. Okay, like always, my browser is open up on GitHub. I would urge you to also go to this repository, link to which is in the description below. Whilst you're there, drop me a like, add a comment, and also subscribe to this channel so you're notified every time I add a video. So get yourself to the repository and go to the branches and click on Module 6. When that opens, click in Steps and open the Markdown Module 6 file. And that will just render the Markdown into GitHub like this. It looks nice and easy to read along with. I'll put one together for each module. Okay, so this is the one we'll be following along with now. First part of it says that, look, we're following along from module 5, so this is module 6. This is what your directory should look like. Now, before you get to the steps and commands, just make sure your configuration is exactly the same. If it's not, just pull down from module 6. You should be at the same point, okay? So steps and commands. Let's have a look here. So first of all, cd into root directory and also fire up a virtual environment. You should know what you're doing by now. Let's open up VS Code so you can see that I'm actually there. Right, so this is what you should look for in your terminal. So venv, that means your virtual environment is up and running, and you're in the Django course directory, which is your root directory. We don't need to go to GitHub now. This is the same module. Where are we? Steps here, module 6. Okay, so Django forms. So unless you're planning to build a website, unless you're planning to build websites and applications that do nothing but publish content and don't accept inputs from visitors, then you're going to need to understand forms. I've pulled that straight from Django website. And the reason I've done it is because I wanted to make sure, where are we? I wanted to make sure that I could reference that now, because forms are huge. It's a massive, massive part of Django. Most web apps, web applications, websites will have forms, right? Whether you're adding blogs, signing up, changing your bio, adding an avatar. This is all done and handled by forms. Now, forms are just not what are rendered in the page. So you've got a form, HTML element, and CSRF tokens, and all of that sort of stuff, and the actual fields, inputs, what have you. That's one part of it. The other part of it is actually accepting that information into the Django app, validating the data, posting the data to the database if required, or sending off for further processing. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is required that Django Forms does seamlessly when you know what you're doing. Okay, so I would urge you, link to this page, by the way, is in the description below. I'd urge you to visit their forms documentation page, give it a good read. Okay, so in HTML, a form is a collection of elements. So you have a form element and inputs, and you have a submit button. Okay, just to sort of glance over that. Get and post are the only HTTP methods that we use when dealing forms. So you have a get request for a form. So that get request could be just nothing, or you can instantiate the form with data from a database, or you have a post request when you're posting data through the form, and then the view will take that, process it, validate it, and save it, right? So that's a little bit there about methods. You've then got Django's role in forms. So handling forms is a complex business, and it is. Let me zoom in a little bit if I'm going to read that. Consider Django's admin. There are numerous items of data and several different types may need to be prepared for display in a form, rendered as HTML, edited using a convenient interface, returned to the server, validated and cleaned up, and then saved or passed on for further processing. There's a whole lot of stuff going on there, right? But Django has a way of you being able to just code up a form nice and easily in Python language and render it to a HTML and actually process the get and the post request very, very easily. It's a little bit hard to get your head around initially. That's why we've got the code in the markdown files, so you can just copy paste and just understand it. Please read the docs. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's go back to Django. Where are we? Sorry, in the module there, VS Code. Okay, so we want a forms.py file in our user's app. So new file, that's forms.py. And if we just take my code here, creating two forms. So we want a form so users can sign up. We want a form so users can sign in. To do that, we are going to inherit from the built-in user creation form and the built-in authentication form. Okay, so Django's got it's got these forms already built in. That's what's so good about it. But by inheriting from them, you can inherit all of the code and the fields and everything else and the functionality, or you can inherit and then change and tweak it accordingly. So what we're doing here is we're inheriting from the user creation form. So users can sign up. They pass in a username, 2 passwords that must match, and then they click submit and they sign up, right? But I'm saying here that for the username, I want it to be a char field, which is straight out the box. And I want it to be a max length of 150, required true. Now it can be false, but if it's true, the input element that the form is rendered, that is rendered to HTML, it defaults to required. Okay, so you've probably seen them in HTML. If you put that as false, it won't have required, which means technically speaking, you could submit the form without a username, but it would fail because we're expecting a username. But required equals true. The reason I wanted this in here because you can then send in a widget to the form, okay? And this is going to be a text input. Now you can have password input, which we've got here. You can have email input. You can have text areas. You can have selects, choices, things like that. There's a whole bunch of them. So read the docs and you'll get a whole list of the different options you got for the widgets. Now in the widgets, you can also pass through class attributes. So you can actually detail what those inputs have in terms of IDs, classes, and things like that. So that means that you can apply CSS to your form to make it render beautifully in the web page. And this is where you do it. It means you haven't got to manually do it in the HTML. Okay, so that's why I've got the username, password 1 and password 2 detailed here. But technically speaking, you wouldn't need to if you're inheriting from the user creation form. We've then got a meta class, and we detailed that actually the model that we're linking this to is the user model. Okay, so when we save the post data that is sent in from the form, we save it to the user, we validate the data and we save it to the user model. And the fields we want are username, password 1 and password 2. That's all we're doing. This is a model form. Now there are other ways that you can you can create forms. You watch other tutorials and they do it in loads of different ways. But essentially, we're trying to create a form in a Django class that allows us to render the form in HTML, handle the get and the post request, validate the data, process the data, and save it to a database. So whichever way you get there, there's 101 ways of skinning a cat. Whichever way you get there, providing it works, who cares, right? So that's my form. User, form, auth form. Now, the auth form, we're inheriting from the authentication form. Again, all you need is a username and a password. Now, you technically don't have to put that if you're inheriting this, but I like to add it there. Okay, no, it's not hurting anyone, and you can detail exactly what's going on with this input. This is how it will be rendered in the web page. Linking it to the user model, and we're passing through fields, username and password. That's all there is to it. There are 2 forms. Okay, those forms are now ready to be rendered to a view, HTML via a view. So that's what we need to do next. Views. So a view function, or view for short, is a Python function that takes a web request and da-da-da-da-da-da. We went through that when we were creating views in the core app. But essentially now what we're doing is we want this view to render a form. So that's the difference. So let's open up users views and add the following code. There's a lot going on there. I'm going to use GitHub for this. Scroll down. Let's copy this. And views, Control A, Control V. And we'll save that. Sorry, 1 second. There we go, back again. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is our views file for our user app. Now, there's a lot going on. We're importing a whole bunch of stuff because each of these views that we're now going to go through does a lot of different things. Now, these things might require decorators to say that you can only get to this view, or users can only access this view if they're authenticated. So we're bringing in decorators, we're bringing in redirect methods and reverse methods and HTTP response redirect. There's all these different things. And you go through, I find whenever you go through these tutorials of Django, the guy who's or the girl who's ever the tutor is, they'll have all of these different imports, and you're sitting there scratching your head as to why you're bringing them in. Hopefully by the end of this module, you'll understand each of them. Okay, so what we've got here is from.forms, import user form and auth form. They're the 2 forms that we've just created. Okay, so let's minimize some of this to make it a little bit easier on the eye. So what have we got here? We've got a sign up view. So this is where a user can sign up. The sign in view. Guess what? That's where they can sign in. You've got a sign out function based view, which is the first time we looked at one of those in this course. Then we've got an account view, which is this is where the user will be redirected to when they're signed in. And then we've got a user info view. Now this info view is where they can update their profile. Okay, so don't worry about that just yet. It's just the way I've named them. Okay, so let's start with a sign up view. This is where we're going to be adding the form. So we've got a doc string here, first and foremost, in the same, this set up in exactly the same way as we do. That's why if we're using auto docs in admin, it will be rendered perfectly in there. So that's why we've done that. This is a form view. So from generic, like we did in core. So in views in core, we're bringing in template view from generic. In users.views, we're bringing in generic again, but we're using form view. So this is a view that's been pre-built by Django to handle forms. Okay, it does a lot of the heavy lifting, but there's still some stuff that you need to, unlike template views, you just need to say what template it is sometimes. Other times it will just guess and work out which template you want to render. But in a form view, you need to actually detail what form we're using, where we're going to redirect a user, and you need to then add a form valid method, right? So we'll go through that, right? So generic.form view, what template are we using? So we're using users/signup. We haven't created that yet. We'll do that in a minute, right? So that is where Django will look for this HTML, the HTML that will render the form. Class that we're using, so the form class, this is the form we just created called user form. And where do they get redirected? Well, we're going to redirect them to a URL called account. Now we'll create that in a second. And then lastly, what we've got is a form valid method. So if the form is valid, so if all of the fields have been completed, if it's got a CSRF token, if the password is, if the passwords match, basically it does all that validation in the background. Right? If it's valid, if the form is valid, then we go ahead and we do, we then save the form. Okay, so user equals form.save. So that then saves the form, and in doing so, it creates a user because this is linked to the user model. Okay, so it creates a user with the username of whatever, with the password of whatever. Okay, now built into Django, we have a method called login. Now, if we call login, we can log our newly created user in. Okay, so what we've done, we've saved form.save to user. So it's saved the data, it's created a user, and it's saved that user to a variable called user. That's what we're doing there. Okay, calling login, passing through self.request. So the request, I'll show you in a second when we get it all on the page. The request is the request from the user. So it's that instance. So this user that is using our web app is assigned a request, a session, right? Okay, so we're pulling through that request, passing it through to the login method, and we're also passing through a newly created user. When we call that method with those two attributes, it signs up and authenticates that user. So that user is fully authenticated, okay? And then we call the HTTP response redirect. So we want to redirect that user to the success URL. So we want to redirect them to account. So they sign up, it authenticates them, pushes them to account. That's what we're doing. 4 lines of code. That's all to it. Nothing to it. You can obviously get more complicated, but that is all we're trying to do with the sign up. We've got sign in, doing very similar. I don't need to go through all this. It's just a different form, same redirect, except when this form is valid, we just pass through login. And from form, we've got get user. Okay. Then we've got sign out. The built-in authentication form has a method built into it called get user. That's why we're calling that, by the way. So it's form get user. You don't need to save it. We're not saving anything to the database, but we're just calling a method that's built in. We pass that through to login. It logs them in and redirects them. Okay. Sign out is our first function-based view. So it's a little bit different. You can see here, class, we use capitals. That's generally what you do in Django. But with a function-based view, it's normally underscores between the words. Pass-through request, don't ever forget to do that. And all we do is we call log out and we just pass through the request. So that will log the user out. They will no longer be authenticated. They won't be able to access anything that only authenticated people or logged in users can use. Okay, and then we redirect to user sign in, which is a URL we haven't created yet. So return, redirect, reverse. So that's why we're importing these. Okay, we've already looked at log out, log in, looked at generic, we've looked at this. So what we haven't looked at is this. So it's a decorated for a method decorator, and then we've got a login required decorator. Why do we need those? Right, so we've got an account view. Okay, so this is the view that we're going to use to render a user's account. So an authenticated user gets redirected to this URL, and they can see their account, so their username, their bio, address, whatever. It renders it to the account HTML file, which we haven't created yet, and then we've got this method called dispatch. So what we're trying to do here, because this is a class-based view, if it was a method, sorry, a function-based view, what you would do, you would add the decorator there. Okay, sorry, well, you would do it here if it was a method-based view. Sorry, function-based view. There you go. That would work. That would say that only authenticated users could access this URL or this view, right? But because this is a class-based view, that's not how you code it in Django. What you do is you add a method decorator to the dispatch method, and then you add the login required decorator within that. So what this is basically doing is saying, look, unless you're logged in, unless you're authenticated, sling your hook. Okay, so if somebody tries to access /account, it will be redirected to sign in each and every time. That's how it works. And then the same goes for the user info. We've got that there. So you can't access this page unless it's user info. We'll be adding a form to this as well. So they're the views, right? Let's scroll down, scroll down. We now need to add URLs. Okay, so we need to create a URLs file. So URLs, a clean, elegant URL schema is an important detail on a high quality web app. We've gone through that already. Let's add a new file, urls.py, and then we'll dump this code there. So same as core, bringing in these. Okay, so bringing in path, we're bringing in the views that we've just created. We're calling this users. And then in URL patterns list, we're then creating a whole bunch of paths. Sign up, sign in, sign out, account, and info. They're the 5 views we've just created. So one URL for each view. That's what we've done. Now we've wired this up slightly different. One sec, what's going on here? Info view. Is that correct? It might just be a bit of a delay. There seems to be. Why is that white there? Anyway, right, we'll worry about that. Could be because I added the decorator and Django doesn't like it. It's taken a minute to look at it. So actually, it could be the name of it. User info view. That's why. Look. There you go. Now it likes it. That's what I like about VS Code. For the extensions, it kind of tells you where you're going wrong. That would have failed. So just beware of that. I will probably change the code in GitHub, but look, if you're following along, no bother, right? So we're calling it users, and we're creating a view for each of them. Now look at these, how I've put these, right? So we've got class-based views. You can see when we're detailing the view, we're adding as view because it's a class-based view. You need to add as view, okay? Because it's a Python class. We want to render it as a view, okay? Function-based view, you don't need to do that. So it's views.signout. You only need to reference the function. That's all you need to do. And then we add a name to each of them. Sign up, sign in, sign out, account, and info. We'll be referencing those in Django template tags. But we went through this in core. This is how you structure your URLs in an app. So these URLs are specific to the user's app. The core URLs are specific to core. And we wire it up to the project in URL conf, which is the next step, right? So our project has been modularized into applications. Therefore, we now need to register our user app in URL conf. So we need to take all of this code, go back in the Django course, go into URLs, Control A, Control V. You can see what I've done there. We've just basically added another line in here, which is now users, okay? That's what we've done. So now we'll be looking for, or the app will be looking for URLs registered in the users app. Good. It's nearly there, nearly there, nearly there. So we now need a templates directory in users called templates. Within that one called users, and then we add all of our HTML in there. So new folder, templates, new folder, users, and then we'll have a new file called signup.html, I think it's called. soon find out. Okay, so that's the scheme that we need. That's how we need our directory to look. Create a sign in HTML. Okay, we can do that. Okay, and then within sign in, we want to dump all of this code. Now, if you're familiar with Django, yeah, I'm not extending anything. We've got the, these aren't linked together, but they will be soon enough. So this is our sign in HTML. So we've got the doc type, HTML head and body. So within the body, h1 tag, calling sign in, and we've got this form here. Okay, so the form is method equals post. So remember, you can have a get or post. Okay, so if we were to submit the form, it would post the data. When you render the form, it's a get request. So we'll instantiate it with a user instance if that was indeed what we wanted to do. But we were not doing that on a sign up, sign in. So that is a Django template tag called CSRF token, which essentially just adds another input to your form with a CSRF token in it. That token is sent with the form with a post request, and it's accepted by Django just to make sure that it's being posted by a real person and there's no fraudulent stuff going on. That's what that's doing, okay? And if you don't have it, it won't work. So you need to have it in your post request in your form. Then we've got the form. So we're rendering the form. This is a form view, right? So generic form view. The form is being posted to the context of this HTML document. So we access it with form. That's what these little squirrely brackets are all about. Okay, so we're accessing form, it's in the context as P tags, so paragraph tags as form. So each input in the form will be rendered as a P, as P, as P. Okay, now there's a number of different ways you can render it, but that's one of the easiest ways. We then have a button of type submit. Okay, so this particular one will have a username, a password, and a button. Done. Leave it as that. Let's move on. Create a sign up. So I'll take this, I can just dump that in my sign up. Same again, we've got a CSRF token, form as P, submit. We then have an accounts page. So take this, new file, account.html, save. Right, this one's, there's no form in this. So I've got a h1 tag saying welcome to your account and request. So we're accessing the request in the context. We'll look at that when we look at the debug panel. So request.user profile.full name, which is the method we wrote into our model here. Okay, so we're getting the full name of the user or the email. There's a break, and then we've got an A tag with a href, and then we're using the URL template tag, accessing users, which is the app, and sign out. So, when I was saying that we're going to be calling, so the URL is, we're referencing it by name. Well, in URL, that's what we're doing there. Sign up, sign in, sign out. So that particular link saying the link to this A tag is sending the user to the view that signs them out. So it's the user's app, sign out URL, which refers to the sign out function in views. That makes sense? It's the flow of data. Okay, so that's the account. We've got create info. So let's go in here, new file. Let's go info.html. And we'll dump. That's it, yeah. Same again, h1 tag. And then same again with a sign out. We'll be adding some meat to those bones a little bit later. Okay, so settings, we need these in the settings file of our project. So this is the login URL, the logout redirect URL, and the login redirect URL and the logout redirect URL. Okay, so this is core home. So if somebody was to get signed out, as in they click the sign out, it will be redirected to what is detailed in the settings file. These are needed. So open up settings, let's go to the very bottom here. There we go. So users sign in, remember, so users app, sign in. That's the core app, home. So we're going to core, it's this one here, which refers to the home view, which is this one. That's how it works. Nice and easy. I've opened up so many files here. Let's close some of these down quickly. Come on now. Cool, right, so root directory, that's it. Yeah, no. We're right, so we have now got to the end of this module. So before I just go through the root directory, drop me a like, add a comment, will you? It'll be massively helpful. I'd like to get the feedback and also subscribe to the channel. So in this module, what we've done, just to sort of cap it off and bookend it, we have fleshed out our users app, built a couple of forms, and we've created the HTML so we can actually see them in the browser. And we will look at them in the browser and we'll start tinkering around with them in the next module, which is module 7. So thanks for watching. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next module.